Hi everyone, I'm back to do part 2 on this page. It's called Promenade in R.J. Hampson's Around the World. So this is a cool thing about these connector pens when you're working with them. I could snap all those colours that I've used so far together to remember that that's what I've used. And it's just, you know, very minor thing, but it's handy. So this is as far as I got with that first part of the video. It is still actually feeling like it's not completely dry, and it will probably be best to leave those sections to dry fully before I decide how I'm going to proceed with them. Looking at this now, I'm thinking that this colour needs to be somewhere else on Mr. Fogarty's outfit, so I have that here. This is what I was using. So I'm not sure whether to do the hat or the band. I'm thinking I'll do the whole hat in that colour. There you go. Once you sort of put that pen to paper, you have to go with it. So I think I'd like the hat in that colour, and the band perhaps will be the same colour as his jacket there. Now, if you do want a good solid colour with these types of pens or markers, what you can do is wait for that to dry. So go in one direction with your pen, wait for that to dry, and then you come back in the opposite direction and work that and wait for that to dry. And you can see I'm still probably going to end up with some lines there. Then I could come back at a diagonal direction across it. Now I'm being impatient and I'm not waiting for mine to dry, and I'm going to risk tearing the paper up, but you come back in that direction and you'd wait for that layer to dry, and then if there still needs to be more, I'd come back in the opposite direction again. And you can see that I'm tearing the paper up because I'm not waiting for it to dry in between. And so you just keep repeating that process until you get to the point where that is a nice solid colour and you're not going to have any lines or streaks or marks in it. Now, providing you wait for each layer to dry completely, you're not going to tear your paper up like that, and you will get a nice result. This lady's hat, for example, that is dry now. I did that to start with, so that is actually completely dry. So if I come back over this now, I'm not tearing the paper up. Okay. So if you want that solid colour with no streaks, if you just go through that process as many times as it takes until you're happy with the depth of colour, you just go in one direction, then you come in the opposite direction, you can come then at a diagonal and go in the opposite diagonal, and you'll get a nice solid result, nice smooth result. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to ruin your paper and tear up the surface of the paper like I do, but that's just because I am really impatient. And it's quite often said that I work quickly and I seem to get pages finished really fast. Well, that's why, because I am impatient and I pay the price for it in damaging the paper somewhat, but that's just the way I am. That's just the way I like to keep going. And so, you know, obviously if I didn't want to ruin the paper, I'd have to learn how to be a bit more patient. So this is really starting to feel quite dry now. Doesn't take that long. You may or may not know that I live in Australia. I live in Adelaide, South Australia, and our weather is quite pleasant at the moment. We're in the mid-20s Celsius, and things like this dry pretty quickly when the weather is nice. Even in winter we don't really get it so cold that it will take a long time to dry, but it may take a bit longer where you are, of course. Now, I'm still not too sure what I'm going to do with this lady. This is looking rather bland, but with some shading and some pencils that will probably pick up. I'm thinking what I like to do is try and have some of these main colours pop up in small areas around the picture so that it draws your eye around. So later on, for example, this colour here might end up in the ship there somewhere. It's probably going to end up in the rope. Possibly, however I colour this, some of this will end up in there. Some of that blue might end up in the shadow. And I look for ways to do that. And I did say I was going to do that in that blue, so I'll do that now. So I'm kind of thinking, like, how will I bring the colours in together so that Mr. Fogarty and this lady don't look like a matching pair, because they're obviously just, you know, acquaintances who are meeting. She's a fellow passenger en route to the Suez Canal on board the Mongolia. So she's, you know, not his partner, she's just another passenger on the ship, and they're actually not going to look like a, oh, I'm so sorry for that. They're not going to look like a matching pair. But I'm just thinking, perhaps now that I'm looking at it, perhaps that blue, we can have touches of it in her feather. So, and I'm going to use the water brush just to blend that out. So at this stage, I just putting that colour down to remind me that that's what I'm thinking I want there. It's not necessarily how that's going to end up. So, you know, your eye's going to go from back and forth to those. And I'm thinking that now that she has that in her feather, she also needs a little bit of it somewhere else. And so I'm just going to dive in, and I'm actually going to make her little purse here that colour. I'm just going to leave that little bit of white there just so that you can see that it's a different area, because I've covered up, or the colour is so dark that it's camouflaging those lines there. And I want it to be a suggestion that is like a break between that front part of the bag and the back part of the bag. And instead of colouring the flap, I'm just going to use the water brush to lift a little bit of colour from here. And what that is doing is it's actually lightening the front of this bag up really nicely. Now, if later I decide that that little flap there is still too dark, too light, I will use coloured pencil to come in and just sort of carefully darken that up, but I don't want it too dark. And then when that's dry, I will probably use a little bit of white coloured pencil to come back on there and, you know, put the further highlight onto that. Now, even though I haven't gone over the line here, I've used enough water in the centre that it's pushing outwards, and it is taking a little bit of that colour past the line. And that's not ideal, but it's happened and I'll work with that. I can just darken around here so that it looks like there's a bit of a shadow, and I'll probably use the colour of the skirt just to do that. So I'll let that dry and see just how bad it is at the end. So now I need to start thinking about this lady's hat, and I'm not 100% sure what colours I used here now, but I have a limited palette anyway, so it's got to be one of these connector pens. So I'm just going to put like a mid shade of green in there, and then I can come back later with coloured pencils and lighten or darken as I see fit. And it's quite a small area, so I'm not going to be really fussy about you know, making that really too lifelike. It kind of clashes with this because this is really a very yellow green, and that's not. That's almost got a bit of a fluorescent look about it. So if I don't really like that, I will use the water brush on there and see if I can lift some of that off. And if that doesn't work, then, you know, when all else fails, it'll be white pencil or coloured pencil or the white acrylic paint pen. Okay, I'm just making it look a little bit different anyway, so that's good. The alternative thing that I can do, if I can't fix that up any other way, is use the same pen and put some small, in fact I might do that now, just put some small dots in here. And that ties those two areas together a little bit better then. It's not such a jarring change from the yellow green to this green. And I'm thinking that, you know, she just needs a little bit around there. A little bit under here. Okay. And perhaps a little bit there. So I have no idea what to do with those flowers yet either. My standard go-to for a flower is to leave it like a daisy, so yellow in the centre and white petals when all else fails. And then you just sort of dab a little bit of yellow around. So that's that. I'm thinking her lips can be a little bit of the colours in her outfit. And then I'm going to use this to blend it in. Okay. I'm thinking the button on her jacket can match the skirt. And now that that is all dry, I'm going to start to suggest some shadows in the folds. So I'm just thinking about how fabric folds on itself. Quite often there'll be, you know, these two areas are coming forward. So that one's going to fall behind because it's kind of like a plate, but it's not a plate. That one just really gently needs a suggestion, perhaps. And again, you don't have to do it on every single one. I'm thinking that one will probably be one that falls behind. But you're just making the suggestion of these things rather than making it look lifelike. Our little cricket friend, although he's forward and he's in front of her, he's not likely to be casting a shadow on her dress, but you can just put the tiniest bit of colour behind him, you know, so that he comes forward a little bit more. You know, he's not going to be casting a shadow on her, but it just helps him to come forward. And I'll wait until that bag is dry, and I will have to darken up here because it has bled out over the line a bit. That is what will happen. The pigment will continue to keep moving and bleeding. As long as that is damp, it will keep moving until the paper is dry enough that it stops that from going any further. I probably could avoid that happening if I had a heat tool or a hairdryer and dried the paper off quick enough that it didn't keep doing that. But for the purposes of a colouring book, I'm not really too fazed by that. That doesn't bother me. You know, should I be working on, you know, something that was supposed to be more polished, I would try to stop that, but it's not. It's just a colouring book, so it doesn't matter. I'm happy with that. I'm just having a think about this little feather here, and I think I'd like to just introduce that little lighter shade there, just to work with that. And I really like the idea of using this colour to make her scarf, because it's actually you know, working well against that, I don't know what you call it, yellowy goldy colour, being very technical again. And I've got a feeling I'd like to sort of just have a touch of that there, and even on there. Okay. And this one could come in to these areas where this one has been diluted and bled, because the colours just work really well together. This particular one is drying out, it's not very dark, and so that's working quite well there. I like to think that Mr. Fogarty is, you know, he's a man of means, but it's a bit faded and a bit shabby on the edges. Like he's, you know, he's bought good stuff in the past, but it's starting to look a little bit shabby. It's just a little story I have in my head of him. Now I've got a couple of these from different sets, and I think this one here is, yeah, this one's a newer one and it's a lot juicier, it looks darker. So I'm going to do that for his tie. And and I've actually made his shirt cuff there go all blue. That will need a paint pen on that one. And I think his socks would probably look good in that colour. Okay. And I don't know why, but I have it in my head that Mr. Fogarty's lip should always be a little bit lighter. So that's like a sort of lemony colour there. And I'm going to do that in those white areas I've missed, and might do that there as well. Might do her little spot the same. Now I'm actually thinking that might reframe there. I do hope you've been able to see all of this. I think that I will use this pale lemon colour to go over these lines in her dress. And it's probably too light, but I'll put some of that just in there to help tone it. I'm actually thinking these cuffs won't be white after all. When that's dry, I'll use a white pencil just to reinstate a bit of a highlight on there. Now I've just realised that the cricket is actually on a lead. She's walking the cricket. That's kind of fun. Some people like to match their animals to what they've got in their outfits, so I think that we'll use, perhaps we use this colour for the lead. And those little bits I'll use a bit of metallic pen. I don't know if he's a cricket or a grasshopper, I don't know what the difference is. I'm just going to give him some highlights of this colour. I don't really want him to be brown. And I think what I'll do is a bit of green. I'm going to use this one. It's sort of a murky yellow-green. I still want a lighter green again for his body. There's the one that I'm looking for. This is one of my favourite greens. It's showing up quite yellow on there, but it's a really bright yellow green, so it works well with that blue. So just smush those together. And that section there is underneath, so it needs to be a bit darker. Now I'm not well up on my anatomy of crickets or grasshoppers, but something tells me that I'd like to leave that underbelly lighter. And I'm just going to put a suggestion of colour in there with that one. And the eyes, I like to leave the eyes quite white and big in these books, but I need a little suggestion of grey around there, and I think all of my grey markers that I have left are a bit dark. I have this one lighter colour, but it's starting to dry out as well, but yeah, see, that's enough just to sort of suggest that the eye is round, and we'll do that under the eyelids on our lady frog here, and a little bit around there on Mr. Fogarty's. I'd also like to use this particular colour just to suggest shadows on white things. Just to do that. We'll use it here on her blouse. And because I've used the same marker in all these different areas, it's just tying those two together. So same with here. It's not jarring to the eye, and it just encourages the eye to keep travelling around and finding that colour. So it's leading your attention to different areas on the picture. Okay, I'm thinking that this railing here can be grey, so that's a really easy choice. You see I'm starting to get a pile up here. That one's in shades. That dark colour's nice, but I don't really want the rest of it to be that dark. So all of these areas where there could be a shadow, I'll use that darker colour there, but it's really too dark for the rest of it. I'm going to need to find a lighter grey marker. I might have to go into my new set and just, that one's lighter. That's better. So the lighter areas can be this one. And as you can see, I'm not really being overly careful or fussy. It sometimes helps to think about markers really are just a base, and they're just a starting point to get that colour scheme going. And then the coloured pencils can come in and do all the finer detail, really cementing those decisions, I suppose. So what I will do here is do that. Sometimes I find it seems to work better if I do a light layer of the light colour, come in with the darker colour while it's still damp and not completely dry, and then tease that back out with the paler colour again. Just a bit of trial and error until you get that result that you want. What is that saying? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Sometimes you just have to dive in. If you can't do that in a colouring book, where can you do it? I think that will do for now. And I'm guessing that railing across the top is wood. And I'm thinking like a nice warm colour. So I'm going to go with that same colour I used for Mr. Fogarty. And then what I can do later to make that so he's not matchy is come back with a coloured pencil to work on that, because I'm so limited with the colours with the connector pens. It's not necessarily going to be the right colour in the connector pens. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to move that a little bit so that I can get in here. Now at this point, I'm not sure whether that last area there is part of the boards, the wooden boards, or whether there might be like a lip standing up. So I'm not going to colour it for now until I've made a decision on that. Okay, so this point I'm just going to do it sort of pretty lightly and roughly. Doesn't have to be perfect. So what I might do with those shoes is bring in more of a orangey, orangey tan colour, maybe more sienna brown, warm brown, so that he doesn't look like he's a part of the boards of the ship. Now, this is such a big area, I couldn't possibly go along there and do that technique of just long lines. And the boards of a ship are probably going to be weathered and rough. And that's why I'm going to leave some white bits in there so that I can mess around with it later. But the boards on the deck of a ship are not going to be regular, even and perfect. So that will do for now, and I can come back and I can sort of, tidy that up later. Now, these things are pulleys. So I'm guessing they're probably going to be some sort of metal. And I'll quickly do those in the same colour as the railing. And I think that will have to be the end of part 2. So again, being metal and pulleys, they're at sea. These things are not going to be perfect, and I'll come back with other colours and pencil to grunge them up, dirty them up. And same with that. Okay, so I will leave that there for the end of part 2. Hope you're enjoying that so far, and I'll come back with part 3 soon. Bye for now.